Picture this. You wake up Christmas morning in 2016. The past year, you and your brother saved up to buy a PS4, and now for Christmas, you want games for that PS4. You run to the living room and see a small rectangular present wrapped under the tree, and excitedly you hope it's Minecraft, your favorite game to play on your tablet. Finally, when you open the gift, you see it, the game you wanted most, right in your hands. But it doesn't seem quite right. This was the Christmas morning I experienced when I was 8. My parents had accidentally bought the wrong Minecraft. However, it didn't faze my young mind. Throughout the next year or so, I played this game over and over and over. Now that I'm 18, I've decided I want to go through my favorite childhood games and see if they truly are as good as I remember. Minecraft Story Mode opens with the tale of 4 legendary figures: Magnus the Rogue, Ellegaard the Engineer, Gabriel the Warrior, and Soren the Builder. Together, they form the Order of the Stone, the group who traveled across the land seeking adventure, and eventually culminating in their victory over the Ender Dragon, cementing their legacy as heroes that the world can rely on. Moving to the current day and age, we meet Jesse, the player insert, Olivia the Redstoner, Axel the Large Man, and Ruben, the Pig. This is part of the main cast and characters. In our treehouse, we mentally prepare ourselves to finally win the annual building competition, which we especially want to win this year because Gabriel the Warrior will actually be meeting the winners of this competition. So we all agree to build an Enderman alongside a fireworks machine to grab the spotlight. Arriving at the competition, we encounter our rivals, the Ocelots, led by Lucas, and just before we begin building, the Nether Maniacs are born, with a sad warrior whip. After building this derpy-ass Enderman, a crowd forms and cheers in awe, which angers an Ocelots member and universally hated character, Aiden, who channels the toxicity of 100 Discord moderators all at once, and breaks a block of pure stone with his bare hand in a single hit. Why are we messing with bro? This act of terrorism spreads lava to our build and catches Ruben's costume on fire, who immediately runs away when there's water right next to him. Hearing his screams, Jesse runs off to help Ruben. We quickly find his torched costume in the woods, but see no other signs of Ruben himself. Luckily, soon after this we find Ruben hiding in some tall grass like a Pokemon. However, night has rapidly descended while looking, and we found ourselves cornered by mobs. Luckily for us, our trusty wooden sword breaks, and Ruben runs away once again, leaving us to die alone. Thankfully, our friend Petra saves Jesse from that fate, and leads us to a cave where she shows us a wither skull, telling us she plans to sell it for a diamond. She also lets us craft a new sword, a good and trusty stone sword this time. Moving up in the world, eh? Making it back to town, they see that our derpy-ass Enderman somehow won the building contest. Dipping into a dark alley, we plan to make our deal for the diamond, and we meet a shady man known as Ivor. He's very on edge at the sight of Jesse, having only expected to see Petra, but he does agree to do the deal, except we fell for the oldest trick in the book and we got lapis instead of a diamond. So naturally, we chase Ivor down, cause we ain't no chumps. We chase him into a convention center, grabbing Axel and Olivia and Lucas along the way. Making our way inside, Jesse must have opened his third eye or something, because he somehow finds Ivor's basement room, with no indication of where he went. Inside said basement, we find a really fancy potion, which Axel just takes for no reason, replacing it with a fake. We also find 3 wither skeleton skulls, and the soul sand to make a wither, but it has a strange block in the center. Unfortunately, before we can investigate further, Ivor enters the basement and has an iron golem kick us out. Escaping out of the basement, we realize that Lucas wasn't so lucky, and while the others try to tell Gabriel about the wither downstairs, Jesse runs back to save Lucas. Tricking the golem with a potion, Jesse and Lucas get back upstairs just in time to see Ivor confront Gabriel the Warrior, seemingly having history together, but Ivor summons the wither before we can figure out that history.
Wanna see a magic trick? Good. Abracadabra!
To no surprise, the wither quickly goes out of control, so Ivor tries to kill it with that potion we saw earlier. This obviously fails because Axel took it like the oaf he is. Realizing we can't stop this, everyone flees, following Gabriel to his fortress. The wither rapidly grows into a wither storm, follows us, and wreaks havoc on everything as it follows. Gabriel decides to give his amulet to Jesse, telling us to find the Order of the Stone and it will guide us, as he stays behind and slows down the wither storm. Trying to retreat to the Nether, Petra is caught by the storm and can't make it through the portal. On the other side of the portal, we watch as it gets destroyed before we can go back for Petra, so we're forced to take Ivor's advice and travel to the Temple of the Order of Stone via the Nether. Barely surviving this trip, we return to the overworld and make a classic dirt hut to last through the night. This is when the gang begins to break down, with Axel arguing with Lucas, as if he didn't steal the potion that would have killed the wither, but Jesse gets them to calm down. The next morning, the gang finds the Order's temple and venture inside. While looking around, we find a book that recounts a slightly different version of the Order of the Stone, where Ivor was actually a member, explaining his bitterness to the Order. This also shows a few cracks in the stone's foundation. Later, we complete a lever puzzle, which allows the amulet to point to Magnus and Ellegaard on a map. Jesse decides to go with Axel and find Magnus the Rogue, which is where Chapter 1 concludes itself. Chapter 1 is probably the most memorable chapter of the game. I mean, it is the pilot of the whole plot, and as the pilot, it does a pretty good job establishing the game. We get a sense of the humor of the game and the personalities of the main cast. In particular, I think Chapter 1 does a good job of characterizing the dynamic between Jesse and Lucas, as we see them slowly learn to trust one another and begin to view each other as allies, not enemies, which sets up a good character arc for the two that we will see unfold in the next 3 chapters. We also get to see the tension between Lucas and Axel, which continues for the rest of the next 3 chapters, which also goes to show how deep the disdain our group had for the Ocelots prior to the literal apocalypse. I can't think of any major complaints to make, this was just a good time all around. Picking up where we left off, Jesse and Axel return to the Nether to travel to Magnus' location, leaving Lucas and Olivia to wait for Petra at the temple. Making it through yet another perilous Nether journey, Axel and Jesse resurface at Boomtown, which is currently a Greeper's battleground. Avoiding the Greepers for the time being, we use the amulet to point us in the direction of Magnus, revealing him to be within an obsidian tower. Unfortunately, the Greepers catch onto this as well, and snatch the amulet from Jesse. This cues a full chase, where Jesse and Axel eventually retrieve the amulet and regroup at the base of Magnus' tower. Unfortunately, Magnus traps them, thinking they're Greepers coming to defeat him. In this trap, Jesse manages to convince Magnus to return to the temple and help stop the Witherstorm. However, he can only leave once someone defeats him in a grief-off, so Jesse and Magnus plan to stage a grief-off so Magnus can throw the fight and they can leave. Stepping into the Death Bowl, Magnus quickly disregards the plan and forces Jesse to actually win the grief-off by igniting Magnus' stack of TNT, destroying his tower. Although Jesse won the grief-off, he doesn't really have time to celebrate as the Witherstorm descends on Boomtown, forcing Jessel, Axie, and Magnus to flee back to the temple. Returning to the temple, we're greeted by Petra, who survived her encounter with the storm and found the temple while we were at Boomtown. We also see that Olivia went up to Redstonia and got Ellegaard the engineer to join the group. But upon seeing each other, Magnus and Ellegaard begin to argue like a divorced couple, once again revealing more cracks in the Order of the Stone. This forces Jesse to take charge and calm them down. After discussing with everyone, the group decides that they'll need the help of the last member of the Order, Soren the Builder, because he has a way to construct the strongest TNT imaginable, the Formidabomb. Using the map and amulet, we locate Soren and set off to go get him. Making it to Soren's base, Magnus and Ellegaard begin to argue once again, culminating in them both splitting off from the group to look for Soren alone. After this, Petra pulls Jesse aside to tell him that the Witherstorm gave her a sickness, and it's slowly getting worse, but she asks Jesse not to tell the others. While Jesse and Petra discuss this, a creeper sneaks up on them.
Creeper? Oh man.
Separating the two with its explosion. While wandering alone, Jesse finds a large library with the familiar face of Ivor lurking. While Jesse speaks to Ivor, Petra arrives and a fight breaks out between her and Ivor. Jesse helps Petra to prevent Ivor from escaping, but just as the rest of the gang catches up, Ivor splashes them all with slowness and he slips past them, bringing Chapter 2 to an end. Chapter 2 is probably the least memorable chapter, as it's missing any of the big moments like the other 3 chapters have, but I still enjoyed it a lot. It has the largest timeline split in the whole of the 4 chapters, being that you can either go to Redstonia or Boomtown, each of which will make up about half the chapter in its entirety. We also meet half the Order of the Stone, and get some great characterization of them that will pay off later in the game. We also see more characterization of Lucas in this level, revealing that he really cares for the group despite the arguments that he sometimes causes. I do wish I had decided to be nicer to Ivor, but I suppose he did just summon a literal storm of death and destruction, so maybe it's fair to be angry. Picking back up where we left off, Jesse and the gang are still inside the library, deciding what to do next. As Jesse and Lucas have a bit of a struggle over the amulet, it begins to glow, pointing them towards Soren and leading them underground. Digging straight down, they find themselves trapped within a massive mob grinder.
You don't understand! This is a grinder!
This is why you don't break the golden rule. After a very long attempt at avoiding falling into the grinder, they inevitably all fall in, but instead of dying a painful death by piston, they somehow all fall into the storage room. Once the group gets their bearings, they mostly look around for Soren, while Axel looks for things to steal. Have you learned nothing? As we look, mobs from the grinder begin to fill the collection room, backing us into a corner, which is where we see an end portal and are forced to jump in. Landing in the end, we briefly see Soren going up a large stairwell, so we follow him up the stairs, eventually leading us to a large wool reconstruction of the overworld. At the sight of this, all hope that Soren can help us instantly vanishes, and Lucas has a bit of a breakdown. Jesse goes to talk to Lucas, who reveals he's worried about Petra, noticing her sickness. After raising everyone's spirits for like the 5th time, and solving a secret door puzzle, Jesse and the others enter Soren's real base and begin to search for Soren. Jesse and Olivia eventually find an observatory that watches Endermen, and they realize Soren is disguised amongst the Endermen. Jesse somehow decides that it's a good idea to also disguise himself as an Enderman and then go look for Soren, which unsurprisingly backfires and results in a horde of Endermen getting angry and charging him. But Soren gets to Jesse first and takes him inside. Finally meeting Soren, Jesse explains the Witherstorm to him and pleads for him to help, which after some convincing, he agrees to. Just then, the angry Endermen begin to break into the base, forcing the group to flood the end and return to the overworld. Back in the loot room, everyone quickly gathers the materials to make an F-bomb and rush out of the base as the Endermen begin to flee the end, piling into the loot room now. Outside the base, we are reunited with Magnus and Ellegaard, who are joyed to see Soren in the flesh after so many years apart. But there's no time to catch up as the Witherstorm is on the horizon. Soren explains the plan to bomb the storm, but he and Ellegaard are hesitant to be the ones to detonate it due to the danger. Even Magnus, the explosives guy, refuses. Seeing this display of cowardice, Jesse steps up in their place. At this, both Ellegaard and Magnus offer their armor to Jesse to protect him, and Jesse chooses to take Ellegaard's armor, because I like Ellegaard more, and her armor just looks better. Sue me. And finally, after a harrowing journey to regather the Order, tackling hordes of Endermen in the end, and now facing down the greatest calamity to ever exist, Jesse finally ends this mess and bombs the Witherstorm, killing it and saving the day. As the storm collapses from the sky, the gang begin to celebrate, but then see that a member of the Order did not make it, and we all turn in horror and see Ellegaard in Soren's arms, her life rapidly draining away.
Kablow, kaboom. Rest in peace, my granny, she got hit by a bazooka. Yeah, I think about it every time I hit the hookah. Kaboom, kablow, kaboom.
It should have been Magnus! As Ellegaard dies, Jesse promises to save every survivor from the storm's corpse, then moves to make good on this promise. Pulling people from the debris and moving deeper, he eventually finds a strange looking block. The command block survived the blast, and begins to pull Jesse in. Luckily, Gabriel saves Jesse from this pull. Then, they both watch in terror, as the Witherstorm rises from the earth. But it's not alone. The blast has only made things worse, and 2 more Witherstorms rise from the grave, and the chapter ends. This chapter was absolute gold. First, it deepened the dynamic of Lucas and Jesse, which is my favorite character duo in the game, and I think it's perfect characterization that they both sort of try to take charge at certain times, especially given they're both used to being the de facto leader for their respective groups. We also meet my favorite character in the game, Soren. He's just so silly and whimsical, and his social awkwardness is so relatable. Plus, it makes perfect sense that he's socially awkward. He's been in isolation for who knows how long. Chapter 3 also introduced my favorite running gag. Finally, we also get to see the entirety of the Order of the Stone, which for a group of legendary heroes, have yet to do anything particularly heroic, besides Gabriel, who wasn't even the leader of the group, which I didn't realize until I rewatched the footage to write this script. Yeah, really, Soren is the leader of the Order, not Gabriel. Resuming in the middle of a new Armageddon, Jesse is forced to flee. Dragging Gabriel along for the ride, he realizes that the wither sickness has caused Gabriel to suffer severe amnesia. Barely managing to find everyone else, Jesse and the gang run from the storm, but Petra is getting too sick to run. Luckily, there are horses nearby for them to ride instead. And even further look, the Endermen from Soren's base attack the storms, slowing them down and letting us escape. Stopping in a cave to recuperate, Soren and Magnus realize that Gabriel's amnesia is to the point that he doesn't even know who they are, or who he himself is. He doesn't even know what horses are!
The Witherstorm did something to him.
You mean that thing we just rode on?
No, that was a horse.
Soren decides to go outside to think, while Jesse makes sure that everyone else is okay. It is then that Lucas breaks the news that he's going to leave the group for now, in search of his fellow Ocelots, promising to return once they are safe. After this, Jesse follows Soren outside, only to not see him anywhere, but he does hear arguing in the distance. Following the shouting, Jesse finds Ivor and Soren arguing. Ivor reveals that the Witherstorm is following the amulet and that everyone is in danger, but he also reveals that he has an enchanting book that can destroy the command block. With this new information, the group decides to split up. Magnus and Axel will distract the Witherstorm and weaken it by getting more Endermen to attack it. At the same time, everyone else will go to Ivor's lab to retrieve the book, and Petra will just sit in the cave alone. How helpful. With this plan decided, Jesse's party sets off on a very, very long road trip to the Farlands. Just as we reach the Farlands, we get attacked by witches, which causes Ivor to get separated and lost. At the same time, the others find a massive labyrinth, and instead of going through it like idiots, they simply climb the walls and skip straight to the exit. In the lab, Jesse once again solves several puzzles, using the stories of the Order's adventures. I swear, Jesse is the only guy that gets stuff done. Once inside the vault, Jesse sees the 4 End Crystals, which according to Soren, were destroyed by the Order during their fight with the Ender Dragon, which causes Soren to reveal the whole truth about the Order of the Stone. They're cheats. All 5 of them. They used the command block to fake killing the Ender Dragon, and lied to the whole world. All of Soren's stories he told previously were fake too. He had used the command block to deceive everyone, even the other members of the Order. This is what caused Ivor to leave the Order behind, and eventually seek revenge. Just as Soren finishes telling the truth, Ivor arrives to hear it all. Happy that the truth has finally been revealed, they proceed to the enchanting room. Here I decided to make an axe, and get new armor. Ready to face the Wither with our enchanted axe, we leave to make the long journey again, and reunite with Axel. But the Endermen aren't attacking the storm like they were before. This causes Soren to run away like the coward he is, and Jesse is forced to go and anger the Endermen himself so that they'll attack the storm. Lucas and his Ocelots arrive just in time to help out, and no, this does not redeem Aiden. With all of this, Jesse and Ruben are ready to launch themselves into the Witherstorm to once and truly end this. And after a short fight, they destroy the command block, finally ending things, for real this time. But this victory came at a cost. As Jesse and Ruben fell from the Witherstorm, Jesse landed in water, but Ruben was not so lucky. And in the arms of Jesse, we lose another hero. After this, they all gather around, say goodbye, and the story ends. The ending of Chapter 4 was very well executed. I enjoyed the build up to the final fight, and I also liked that Minecraft Story Mode didn't shy away from character death, although I wish our choices had larger impacts at the end of the story and plot. But the game already does a good job of making your choices matter. I just like the game even more. Like, maybe alternate endings. This was the chapter that I remembered most as a kid, probably because I got stuck in the maze for a long time. But I also remember the final weapon and armor being just so cool. We also see the payoff for all the hints that the Order of the Stone aren't exactly who they claim to be, and we also see that Ivor wasn't some complete lunatic. He's a justified lunatic, and also a top character in my eyes. Overall, I'm very glad I decided to replay this game, and I definitely think that it's just as good as I remember, if not even better. And I'm very excited to play the extra content that I never had as a kid, as well as the sequel, so keep an eye out for that.